The email arrived while I was still stationed in the desert. 13 years of marriage ended with a simple PDF attachment. My name is Michael, 41 years old, a staff sergeant with the 10th Mountain Division. I'd been in Helmand Province for just over 3 months when Lisa decided she couldn't wait any longer. The subject line was cold, moving forward separately. The message itself barely filled 3 lines. She had already filed the paperwork, drained our shared bank account, and moved her friend Eric into our home in Portland. I read the message twice, shut my laptop, took a quick shower in the communal facilities, dressed for my shift, and kept everything bottled inside. When I returned to my quarters that night, I sent a one-word reply, acknowledged. Martinez, who slept in the bunk across from mine, could tell something was wrong. "Everything okay back home?" he asked without looking up from his novel. "Fine," I replied. "Just some personal stuff." He nodded and left it at that. Military life teaches you when to probe and when to give space. To be honest, I wasn't completely blindsided. In the months before deployment, subtle changes had appeared in our relationship. Lisa stopped asking about my daily routine, began working late at the medical office where she managed appointments, started attending fitness classes 3 times weekly, but never seemed to get any fitter. New outfits appeared in her closet. She made friends I never met, and suddenly her phone was password protected. I didn't confront her. I didn't snoop through her messages or follow her around town. That's not my style, but I'm not naive either. So I took some quiet precautionary measures. Nothing dramatic, just practical steps. I secured important documents in a storage facility across town. Birth certificate, marriage license, house deed, with only my name on it thanks to the military loan, benefit paperwork. I transferred my grandfather's vintage watch and my mother's silver collection to the same location, items with sentimental value. I also opened a separate account at a different bank and began directing a portion of my earnings there. Not enough for Lisa to notice, but sufficient to ensure I wouldn't be starting from scratch if everything fell apart. The evening before deployment, she hugged me at the terminal and said, "Stay safe, all right?" Her eyes were completely dry, like she was saying goodbye to a casual acquaintance rather than her husband heading to a war zone. I should have recognized the signs then, but part of me still hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. What Lisa didn't realize was that I had prepared for this possibility. And what she failed to understand was that while I never initiate conflicts, I always resolve them. Lisa and I met at a neighborhood cookout in 2011. I was home between deployments, staying with my childhood friend Ryan in Portland. She was completing her physical therapy degree, but eventually took an administrative position at a medical practice. Less pressure, she claimed. We married just 7 months later. Lisa used to say she was proud of my military service, though she never truly understood it. Her family had no military background. Her father ran a local hardware store. Her sister taught elementary school. She would occasionally ask when I planned to get a regular job, not grasping that after 16 years, the Army wasn't just employment. It was my profession and identity. We purchased our home in 2015. Nothing extravagant, but it was ours, 3 bedrooms, modest yard, peaceful community. The mortgage was solely in my name due to the military loan, but I added Lisa to the deed because that's what committed partners do. They share their lives. My father passed away shortly after our wedding. Massive stroke while working in the garage. My mother followed 3 years later. Aggressive cancer despite never having smoked. They left me some savings. Not wealth by any measure, but enough for Lisa and me to eliminate our student loans and establish an emergency fund. During our marriage, I deployed 4 times, twice to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan. With each homecoming, Lisa seemed increasingly detached, more restless, as though performing in a role she had outgrown. "I never signed up to be a military spouse," she told me once when I mentioned potentially extending my service commitment. "I'm tired of spending so much time alone." I understood her frustration, truly, but the military was where I belonged. It was where my skills mattered and people depended on me. In 2020, things began to shift. Small changes initially. Lisa became annoyed when I called during her evenings out with friends. She started talking about how her coworker Danielle had divorced her husband and was now living authentically. She began making remarks about how we had grown in different directions. I suggested relationship counseling. She dismissed the idea, saying we were just going through an adjustment period. Then came the late nights at work, weekend trips with friends I'd never met, new clothing styles, and a gym membership she rarely seemed to use. I probably should have confronted her, but that's not my approach to problems. Never has been. My father taught me to consider carefully before speaking, to be certain before acting. So I observed and quietly prepared, because my instincts warned me something was brewing. In combat zones, you learn to trust those instincts. 2 weeks after receiving the divorce email, I was eating in the mess hall when my phone vibrated. A notification from our banking app showed another withdrawal, $76,400, nearly everything remaining. I set down my fork and opened the application. Our joint account balance had plummeted to $18.92. Our savings, $42,000, accumulated over years of careful budgeting, had vanished entirely, transferred to an unfamiliar account. Reynolds, a specialist for my unit, glanced over. "Bad news, Sarge. I locked my phone. Just some banking stuff." That night, I used the base communications center to call our bank. The representative explained that Lisa had been transferring funds for weeks, small amounts initially, then increasingly larger sums. The major withdrawals had begun the day after my deployment. I hung up and stood in the hallway for a long time, watching other soldiers laughing, calling their families, living normal lives while mine disintegrated. That's when Martinez found me. "Heard from Thompson that you looked pretty shaken at dinner," he said. "Everything all right?" I don't typically share personal matters, but Martinez had pulled me out of a dangerous situation in Hellman once. I trusted him. "My wife emptied our accounts and moved her boyfriend into our house," I said. "Sent divorce papers while I was on patrol last week." Martinez didn't offer empty sympathies or platitudes. He simply asked, "What's your plan?" "Still figuring that out," I replied. He nodded. "Let me know if you need anything." That night, sleep eluded me. I retrieved my laptop and accessed our home security system, something Lisa probably forgot I could monitor remotely. The cameras showed an unfamiliar pickup truck in our driveway, a stranger walking our dog, using my coffee mug, wearing my favorite team sweatshirt. And there was Lisa, laughing in the kitchen I'd renovated with my own hands during my last leave. Something shifted inside me then. Not anger, exactly. Something colder and more focused. I closed the laptop and took out my phone to make a list. 1. Contact Chris, Army buddy now practicing law. 2. Review military loan terms. 3. Request emergency leave from command sergeant. 4. Examine home refinance documents Lisa had casually mentioned months ago. 5. Verify security of military pension accounts. I no longer felt heartbroken or even angry. I felt determined, as though planning a tactical operation. This wasn't about emotions anymore. This was about strategy. At 0500, before my shift began, I emailed Chris with a subject line, "Urgent legal assistance, confidential." His reply arrived an hour later. "Call me on secure line only." After that conversation, I knew precisely what needed to be done. I didn't need to yell, threaten, or confront Lisa. I simply needed to be patient, observe, and let her own actions become the trap. 2 months later, I was back on American soil. I didn't inform Lisa of my return. No calls, no messages. I checked into a motel in downtown Portland under a different name and contacted Chris. We met at a small diner outside the city limits. "You look exhausted," he said, sliding into the booth. "Feel worse," I responded. Chris handed me a folder. Everything we discussed: house deed, loan documents, bank statements. And this, he pulled out a separate document. "Found something interesting while investigating your finances." It was a refinance application with my signature, except it wasn't actually my signature. Someone had attempted to copy it, but missed crucial details. The middle initial was incorrect, and the handwriting pattern didn't match mine. Lisa did this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Chris nodded. 3 months ago, used the equity to extract $290,000. Your signature is required since the military loan is in your name only. She forged my signature, took out a loan against our house, emptied our accounts, and divorced me, I summarized. Ambitious woman, Chris remarked. It gets more interesting. She listed her boyfriend as a co-applicant. The guy has a record, 2 DUIs and a fraud charge from 2020. I took a deep breath. What are my options? Several, Chris replied. But first you need to decide what you want. I considered this carefully. I want what legally belongs to me, and I want her to face consequences. Chris smiled. Then here's our approach. The following day, I drove past our house. Eric's truck was gone, but Lisa's car sat in the driveway. I watched from down the street, contemplating knocking on the door and confronting her. But that wasn't the plan. Instead, I visited the bank, met with the loan officer who had processed the refinance, showed him my military ID, presented my authentic signature on my driver's license, and displayed the forged documents. His face drained of color. I'll need to report this immediately, he stammered. Understand, I replied. I've already filed a police report. That evening, I received a text from Lisa. Who have you been talking to at the bank? Eric said someone was asking questions. I didn't respond. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office, filed paperwork contesting the refinance due to fraud, and registered formal notice that no property changes could be made without my presence. 2 days later, Lisa called. I let it go to voicemail. Michael, we need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it like adults. Like adults, the same phrase from her email. I still didn't engage. Chris called that afternoon. They've frozen the refinance money. And there's more. Your wife's boyfriend has been driving your truck, right? The one registered in your name? Yes. He was pulled over this morning, driving on a suspended license from those DUIs. They impounded the vehicle. Good. He also had some interesting items in the truck, prescription pads from the medical office where Lisa works. They weren't blank. I closed my eyes. She's been stealing prescription pads? Appears that way. Police are investigating. I ended the call and sat on the edge of the motel bed. This was expanding beyond what I'd anticipated. Part of me wanted to warn Lisa, old habits. But then I remembered the security footage, my home, my dog, my life, all given away as if meaningless. No, this was the path now. I couldn't turn back. And truthfully, I didn't want to. I met with the bank's fraud investigator the next morning. His name was Phillips, a compact man with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. This happens more frequently than you'd expect, he said, spreading documents across his desk. Spouse deploys. Other spouse sees an opportunity. What happens now? I asked. We've frozen the fund from the fraudulent refinance, but there's a complication. Some money has already been spent. How much? About half. $142,800. I leaned forward. Where did it go? Phillips hesitated. I'm not supposed to share that information. It's my house, my forged signature, my stolen money. He nodded slowly, then turned his computer screen toward me. These are the transfers out of the refinance account. I scanned the list. Multiple transfers to someone named Peter Matthews. Not Eric, but someone else I'd never heard of. Who is Peter Matthews? I asked. Phillips shrugged. Not my department, but you should ask your attorney to subpoena these records. I called Chris immediately after leaving the bank. Peter Matthews, he repeated. Let me investigate. An hour later, he called back. Found him. Peter Matthews is a real estate agent specializing in quick sales, cash deals. She was planning to sell our house. I said, the realization hitting me like physical impact. Looks that way. The deposits were likely earnest money to expedite a listing. But here's where it gets interesting. Matthews has done business with Eric Lawson before. Eric Lawson is Lisa's boyfriend? Yes. They've completed 3 transactions together in the past 2 years. I sat down on a park bench, trying to process this information. So this wasn't just Lisa leaving me for another man. This was what? A planned operation? Possibly, Chris said cautiously. I researched Eric Lawson. He has a pattern. Gets involved with women going through divorce or with deployed spouses. 3 cases I discovered so far. Each time, the woman's property gets sold well below market value to one of Matthew's clients. Lawson receives a percentage, then moves on. And Lisa? Did she know about this? Hard to determine. Maybe she's another victim. Or maybe she's complicit. I rubbed my face. This wasn't merely about Lisa's betrayal anymore. This was something larger, something calculated, and other military families had been victims. What do we do? I asked. I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, Chris replied. This crosses state lines, involves military personnel and VA loans. They're interested. That night, I sat in my motel room with a beer, contemplating everything, wondering if Lisa had been manipulating me throughout our entire marriage, or she'd been drawn into Eric's scheme, wondering if the distinction even mattered anymore. My phone vibrated. Another message from Lisa. Michael, please call me. The bank is saying something about fraud, and Eric got arrested for driving your truck. I don't understand what's happening. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed, "Who is Peter Matthews?" I watched as typing indicators appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then vanished. Finally, "I don't know what you're talking about." $142,800, I wrote. Multiple transfers. House listing. No response for several minutes. Then simply, "It's not what you think." I turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning, Chris called. FBI wants to meet. They've been investigating Lawson and Matthews for months. You're not the first case, but yours might be the one that breaks it wide open. For the first time since receiving that divorce email, I felt something resembling satisfaction. Not because my marriage was ending, but because the truth was finally emerging. I met with FBI agents Miller and Torres at their field office in Portland. They recorded my statement and took copies of all the documentation Chris and I had gathered. Your case helps establish a pattern, Agent Miller explained. Demonstrates intent and organization. Elevates it from isolated incidents to conspiracy. What about Lisa? I asked. My wife, ex-wife. The agents exchanged glances. We're still determining her level of involvement, Torres said carefully. Did she ever mention financial difficulties? Pressure to sell the house. I thought back. She kept saying we were house poor, that we should downsize. I didn't see the necessity. Our mortgage payments were manageable on my salary. Miller made a note. When did that begin? About 7 months ago. Around the time she must have met Eric. And the refinance. Torres asked. Never discussed it with me. She forged my signature while I was deployed. They asked more questions, took more notes. When we finished, Miller handed me her card. We'll keep you updated. Meanwhile, don't confront your wife or Lawson. We need to build this case methodically. I nodded. Understood. That evening, I drove to our neighborhood again, parked down the street from our house. Eric's truck was back. Must have retrieved it from impound. Lisa's car was gone. My phone vibrated. Text from Lisa. We need to talk face-to-face. Meet me at Pioneer Square tomorrow. I showed the message to Chris over breakfast the next day. Don't go, he advised. Nothing productive can come from talking to her now. I won't, I said. But I want to know what she's doing today while she thinks I'm meeting her. We drove to our house at 9:30 a.m., parked across the street. At 9:45, Lisa emerged, got in her car, and drove away, heading toward Pioneer Square. Now what? Chris asked. Now we wait, I replied. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up. Real estate agency logo on the door. Peter Matthews. Eric came out to greet him. They talked in the driveway, then went inside. Should we follow them? Chris asked. I shook my head. No need. I installed security cameras last year, interior and exterior. They upload to cloud storage. Chris smiled. You never mentioned that before. Never came up, I said, taking out my phone. I opened the security app and angled the screen so Chris could see. Matthews and Eric were in our living room. Matthews was taking photos. Eric was pointing out features of the house. I increased the volume. Should list by the end of next week, Matthews was saying. I've got a buyer interested already. Cash offer, as usual. How much? Eric asked. $390. We list at $450. They offer $390. Everybody's happy. What about the husband? Lisa says he's causing problems. Matthews waved dismissively. Military guys are all the same. They make noise, but they've got deployments, responsibilities. He'll accept a settlement to make it go away. I turned to Chris. You getting this? He was already recording the feed on his phone. Every word. I forwarded security feed access to Agent Miller with a brief message. Happening now. 30 minutes later, our house was surrounded by FBI vehicles. I watched from down the street as agents escorted Matthews and Eric out in handcuffs. My phone rang. Agent Miller. Got them on tape discussing the fraud scheme, she said. Plus conspiracy, wire fraud, and attempting to sell property under false pretenses. We'll need a formal statement from you. Of course. And Mr. Ryan, your wife just arrived at the scene. She's quite upset. I looked down the street. Lisa was standing on our lawn, hands covering her mouth, watching as FBI agents carried boxes of documents from our house. What happens to her? I asked. That depends, Miller replied. On what? On what she knew, and on what you want. I watched Lisa for a long moment. 13 years of marriage. Good years in the beginning before it became whatever this was. I just want what's right, I said finally. The federal case progressed quickly. Eric and Matthews both accepted plea deals, implicating each other and several additional conspirators in what turned out to be a 4-state operation targeting military families. Lisa maintained she knew nothing about the larger scheme, claimed Eric had convinced her I was concealing assets, planning to leave her with nothing. Said the refinance was his idea. She'd merely gone along with it. Perhaps that was true. Perhaps not. Regardless, she agreed to a settlement. Complete restitution of misappropriated funds, forfeiture of any claim to the house or my military pension, and a signed confession regarding the forgery. In exchange, I didn't press charges. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that email from Helmand Province. No fault, clean break, all things considered. On the day the final paperwork was signed, I received a call from Agent Miller. Eric Lawson was sentenced today, 7 years for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Matthews got 10. Thought you want to know. Thank you, I replied. There's something else, she added. We found evidence they victimized 12 other military families. Your case helped us establish the pattern. Those families might recover their money because of you. After we hung up, I sat on the porch of my rental apartment, watching the sunset, thinking about those other families, other service members who deployed believing their homes and marriages were secure, only to return to emptiness. I hadn't set out to bring down Eric and Matthew's operation. I just wanted what rightfully belonged to me. But sometimes, things resolve in unexpected ways. My phone vibrated. Text from Lisa. I never meant for things to end like this. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I called Martinez, who was still deployed. When he answered, I said simply, I figured out my plan. Yeah, he asked. How'd it work out? I looked out at the sunset, feeling the weight of the past year finally lifting. Better than expected. When you get back, I'll tell you all about it. Sometimes the quietest soldiers fight the most important battles, not just on foreign soil, but right here at home. And sometimes justice arrives in ways you never anticipated. I set down my phone and watched the last light fade from the sky. Tomorrow would be a new day, a fresh start. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready for it. Hashtag epilogue. 6 months later. The new apartment feels almost like home now. Smaller than the house, but it's just me and the dog. Lisa didn't fight for custody of Max, probably for the best. He was always more my companion than hers. I've started mentoring at the Veterans Center downtown, helping recently returned service members adjust to civilian life. There's a particular focus on financial protection, teaching them how to safeguard their assets during deployment. My story has become something of a cautionary tale, though I keep the most personal details private. The FBI case expanded beyond what anyone expected. 37 military families across 6 states were identified as victims of the scheme. Most lost their homes. Some lost their life savings. A few lost both. The total financial damage exceeded $8 million. So far, about half has been recovered and returned. Chris tells me the investigation has prompted new legislation to better protect deployed service members from financial fraud. They're calling it the Military Family Financial Protection Act. He says my case was instrumental in getting it drafted. Strange to think something positive could emerge from such betrayal. I received a letter from Lisa last week, postmarked from Seattle. She's moved there to start fresh, she writes. Says she's in therapy, trying to understand why she made the choices she did. Says she's sorry, that she never meant to hurt me, that Eric manipulated her fears and insecurities. Maybe that's true. People are complex, rarely all good or all bad. Part of me wants to believe she was another victim in Eric's scheme. Another part knows that regardless of influence, we all make our own choices in the end. I didn't write back. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Martinez returned from deployment last month. We meet for coffee every Tuesday morning. He's facing his own challenges, PTSD, a marriage under strain, uncertainty about whether to re-enlist. I listen more than I speak. Sometimes that's what people need most, someone who understands without requiring explanation. The settlement money from the house is sitting in an investment account. I'm not sure what to do with it yet. Maybe buy a cabin somewhere quiet when I retire next year. 20 years of service feels like enough. Agent Miller called yesterday. Eric and Matthews are appealing their sentences. She doesn't think they'll succeed, but wanted to give me a heads up. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do turn. Last night, I had dinner with a woman named Rachel, a social worker I met through the Veterans Center. First date in almost 15 years. Nothing serious, just conversation over Italian food. She asked about my marriage. I told her just enough. Not the whole story, but not a sanitized version either. She didn't offer platitudes or look at me with pity. She just nodded and said, "You survived." That matters. It does matter. Survival always matters. Not just physical survival, but emotional and spiritual too. Coming through fire and finding yourself still standing on the other side. Change perhaps, but intact. As I walk Max through the park this morning, watching the sunrise paint the sky, I realized something important. This chapter of my life was never really about Lisa's betrayal or Eric's schemes. It was about discovering my own resilience, about learning that sometimes the battles that define us aren't fought in distant deserts, but in quiet moments of determination when everything we thought we knew has been stripped away. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with my commanding officer to discuss my future in the Army. I've been offered a position training new recruits, sharing the knowledge I've gained over 2 decades of service. There's something appealing about that, passing on not just tactical skills, but wisdom about life, loyalty, and perseverance. Max tugs at his leash, eager to explore a new trail branching off from our usual path. I hesitate briefly, then follow his lead. Sometimes the unexpected route is exactly where you need to go. Whatever comes next, I'm ready for it. Stronger than before. Wiser. More cautious, perhaps, but not bitter. Life is too short for bitterness. The sun breaks fully over the horizon, casting long shadows across the park. A new day. Another chance to move forward. And that's exactly what I intend to do.